Yeah. So, right. So let's get going. I'm going to introduce Yogesh. My name is Fraser Morrison. I'm helping facilitate the session today. Bill's on leave, so he's not doing it today. You've got me. Yogesh is going to be doing the presentation, which is a interactive presentation. You can engage with them and ask questions as you go. Operational sustainability, a practical approach for tech companies and their capital. I mean, we were just discussing earlier. I think it's a good topic for everyone. There's a lot to be learned from this. Yogesh is a sustainability practice lead at Salamander Advisory with 20 years of experience running enterprise transformation and business operations, commercial growth, technology, led governance across global businesses now pointed squarely at making sustainability operational. He also holds sustainability leadership roles at Claymont AI, Claymont Equivalent, where he works directly in an AI infrastructure and data center sustainability. I'm hand you over to him, all right? Yogesh, look, I'm looking forward to the session. It should be really interesting. Yeah, so, thank you. Yes.
Thanks, Mike. Hey guys. Good evening, everyone. This is Yogesh. He just gave a nice introduction of me. Thanks for that. So let's go straight into the topic. Just hold on a minute. Let me share the screen. Then we can run the session. So let me go to the presenter mode, right? So what we're going to do in the next 1 hour is that it's not really about net zero or whatever the jargons we use these days. This is going to be very much focused on operationalizing, so which means how do you integrate into your businesses and how people have done it. So there is a couple of methodologies I probably will share and also give you some use case examples, again, how things happened before and after. So in the meantime, if you have any questions, just stop me in the middle. Feel free to ask any questions you have in the middle. So there are like about 3 polls just to understand the context about like where are we at this in your journey, so that there's a Mentimeter screen will pop up. Just scan it your phone on whichever devices you use, and then you can just score your say your inputs to that, so then we can work from there. Okay, the first question is basically what we wanted to ask. I personally wanted to ask is like, if you can able to put in 1 word, what does sustainability means to you? Meaning like when you hear sustainability, what comes to your mind? This will help to set the context for the next 45 minutes to 1 hour. So just kindly scan and then just type what is that 1 word come to you when you talk about sustainability or when you hear sustainability. There is probably 1 person haven't responded. We just give a few seconds. It's actually good somebody touched ESG when we talk about sustainability. So they are not exactly the same, but they are not exactly different as well. So they actually overlaps there. So it's good. And DC optimization, I believe it is data center optimization. Integration is a good word because we're going to see a couple of examples where the integration failed, how ye become an enemy of yes. Responsibility is good and continuation is good, meaning it's a long change process. So keeping this in mind, let's see, there was 1 new one, responsibility, DC optimization, contribution, environment. Okay, so that was the new one. All right, let's move to the next one. Next, let's start. So for the next 1 hour or 45 minutes, depends on how long it takes. I want you guys to forget completely about all these targets, jargons, whatever you have in your mind, whether it is 2030, 2050, or related to climate change, 1.5%, 1.5 degree problem or a 2-degree problem. GRI or IFRS, CSRD, whatever frameworks you use, completely forget about everything. So it's not that it's not important. It's something we need to remove from our head before we go into the operations mode, right? So, and also think sustainability a bit differently than what we said. It's not about environment. It's not about like ESG reporting and so on. So It is actually a continuous change efforts, similar to, let's correlate this to digital transformation. All of us have went through digital transformation in our life once or twice. But if you don't do it, like, the data basically shows about 70 to 80% of digital transformation efforts fail. It's not the problem the system is bad, or it's not related to the performance of the system by itself. It's more related to how it integrates into your actual business processes and the operations you do on a daily basis. Right. So that's the key word here, which is basically a continuous change. Right. So it's like, the strategy is good. I mean, any sustainability strategy driven by any organization is always good. It always doing the right thing, is always doing the good things, responsible things, and so on. But what happens is it gets stopped somewhere in the middle, from the slides, or from the board meetings, or from the town hall meetings. When you go down further, it stops when it goes into the actual business processes itself, right? So we are going to sit on that for some time, and then we will figure it out, how people have done it, and what are the better ways of doing it, and so on. So again, it's the same thing I told. Sustainability dies exactly the same way as digital transformation if you don't do it right, or if you don't integrate into your process level, right? That's the thing. So in this in this sessions, we're going to take about 4 steps. One is we talk about what is the separations, where is the gap, why people stop in the middle, or why people don't know how to do after the first 2 steps, and so on. This is a bit of a dry session, the first session. After that, it will be a bit interesting. So second one is actually a loop. In operations, we always come up with a loop so that it actually goes and keep on rotating, and it's getting implemented effectively, and learning has to be fed back into where we started, then it get optimized as we go through, right? The word optimization was presented by somebody before, right? So the third part is the hard question, which is always something we always try to avoid when we talk about sustainability in a higher front, is basically where the money comes from. Somebody has to pay for any efforts we put in. So same like, in any change efforts we are doing, any efforts, whether you wanted to drive an digital transformation or AI implementation, whatever it is, somebody has to pay, and some money has to come from somewhere in your P&L, right? And then the fourth one is very specific to the investment industries. There have been a lot of noise recently about banks are pulling off from the climate alliance and so on. So I will give you a stab on, from the sustainability and operations world, how do we see these things, and so on. And finally, we wanted to leave with one honest question, and then that is for you guys to act on as we go through. Right. So I want to give you a quick example here. So let's forget about sustainability, think about digital transformations, right? So when you wanted to embark on a digital transformation, so usually this is what is being told to you by either the company which is driving it, or the teams or the sponsors who is driving it, and you get approval in all the levels. There's a nice milestone done. There's a plan for training and upskilling and everything done. But when you actually start the change inside your operation, it gets stalled somewhere because there's no ownership, into very clear ownership. The old way of working never changed, and also the training is done, yeah, sure, but the behavior have not changed, and then everything stopped somewhere in the middle. So this happens. We have seen this one in a most effective way in many digital transformation efforts. And then its sustainability is somewhere similar, but just that digital transformation, we are talking about a small scale, but sustainability is a continuous longer scale. So when we know this is our problem, so how do we fix it? So usually how we fix it is very simple. So from there, we actually move the ownership towards the operation. Somebody owns the project to run through with it. We optimize our processes, and the process actually guides the actions and decision cross-functionally. So which supports real goals, not some North Star. So this is what's the biggest problem when it comes to operationalizing sustainability. We talk about 2050 or some very long-term goals, which doesn't really cascade down into mini projects or mini efforts, which needs to be optimized in the process itself or the way we do business itself. So that's the thing. So then what happens is the process runs on a daily basis. Like every day, every time you go on a Monday, what I'm going to change in my daily work is guided by the process itself. Right. And there is a mechanism we already have to measure your KPIs in form of like how do you we know how to measure, how to monitor, and how to also reward this reward based on achieving certain KPIs and so on. The signal starts on the Monday. So this is what we have seen for the past so many years, a successful way of how do you implement an digital transformation or a change project in any organization. So sustainability does not seem this way because the target is too far and then the ask is also too far, especially if you're talking about green, right? The impact you wanted to measure will take years and years to even show up in any form of metric systems you have. So, for example, today, if I'm using plastic cups, I wanted to convert this into a paper cup or recycled paper cup. What exactly is the impact I'm actually generating out of this will take probably 10 to 15 to 20 years to even come. Right. So that is actually the problem because we may not be able to operationalize this because we don't have a short-term mechanism to read the impact, whether we are in the right direction or not, and so on. Right. So it's the same way, like the question is very simple. The goal isn't it like in a normal digital transformation efforts, right? The goal is not like 2050. It's usually the next quarter or like after implementation within 6 months or 5 months or even 1 month after the implementation, what is going to change. And most important factor for the team is usually it's about, what changes in my operations or the way I do work on a Monday. So when I go back to work on a Monday, what is the change, right? So this is not exactly happening in the sustainability frame. So that's where the separation or the gap we have it there, right? So again, it's nothing to do with the intent or nothing to do with the budget because people are willing to spend on it. It depends on whatever the pressure it comes from. And it's not related to the knowledge. There's a huge industry about, learn sustainability, learn how to report and all these things. So it's nothing to do with the knowledge either. But it's all about the execution part of it. When I say execution part, I wanted to re-emphasize the word here, saying that, it's about your business operations, the core operations of every single team works, how it goes, and what level of impact it is going to generate, and how am I going to measure that impact. That's the most important thing when I say execution, right? So this is where we are going to sit for the next few hours, for 10, 30, 40 minutes, and then we're going to run through certain simulation processes to see how we are going to achieve these things, right? So so I always say this one, if it doesn't shows up in your system, it doesn't exist because it has to be operationalized into the systems you touch to run your businesses. If it doesn't happen there, then it does not exist. So which means you have not went into the process level to even address this issue, right? Okay, so then let's go quickly to the next one. Okay, what happened to my slides? Okay. So this is a classic example I wanted to share as one of my clients. But again, this is a non-tech industry. It's a cold storage distribution businesses. We will see how this was fixed before, but how it was fixed after. So the background of the industry is about 5% margin. They are basically surviving. Unfortunately, one of their primary clients demanded, they have to go into a sustainability route. If not, they become a risk for them because when they're going for like scope 2 and scope 3, these guys were showed up. So eventually what happened is they went on because the margin is too low. So they wanted to invest on, the solar and all the green stuff. But eventually there's no money there. So even what happened is they reduced all the, increments, bonus, hiring freeze and everything. This is something we always hear whenever there is a budget needed for certain projects, somebody has to take the cut. So this is what happens. And usually what happens in any organization is basically the quietest area is where people get affected the most, which is usually your own team and so on. So that's why I call this as an S. So in this case, what happens is the company, in the name of going green and supporting their primary customers' demands, so they actually started impacting on the S part of it. So the overall their company actually in the impact scoring level, they went much lower compared to where they were before. That's where the E kind of eats the S part of it. right? Hold this company in your mind. Later, when I show you how this is fixed, then that will give you a context about how we can connect this to, the software companies like infrastructure companies, or whether it is a SaaS companies, or even if you're an investor or a capital companies, how this pattern shows up in your systems as well. Right. So another thing is the next poll. I wanted to have a little bit understanding about, like, where do you think sustainability helps you in your organization, right? So if you scan and then you tell me, that will give us some context for the next point. Yeah. So you can say, if you believe sustainability is going to help you with the growth, if it's helpful with the funding, or it's going to be helpful with your bottom line, or it's going to be not helpful at all for you. So that will be a bit of helpful. Hello? Okay, fantastic. So that's good. So none is getting interesting score. Six more people, then we can move to the next one. As I said, the first part is a little dry. Just to understand, there is a context. I was trying to compare this with an digital transformation effort so that you get an idea. It's a continuous change effort. All right, so let's go. Funding is good because the last session is specifically for you to understand how the capital market sees sustainability now compared to what it was probably a couple of years ago. Growth is good, and then bottom line is fine. So none is also interesting. I would challenge that, but again, it's good. Okay, so this is a little bit wrap up of the separation. So it's nothing to do with the knowledge or the value. It's more on the execution problem. Always remember, and you talk about sustainability or ESG in your organization, depends on the context. Always remember it's a continuous change effort, similar to any change program you run in the organizations. You need to integrate that into your business processes and the systems. If it is not included into your business processes and systems, then it does not effectively work. I give you one example before we jump to the next session. Like, for example, if you are like a tech company, right? So, and then you have an accountant. We have a team of like about 30 people in your accounting and finance team. And then the question when I say integrate into the process means that, an accountant should feel the ownership of, how they are connected to your broader vision of your sustainability strategy. If you're not able to connect an accountant who's actually validating a certain, like vendor payment or processing vendor payment and other things into your own sustainability strategy, that means you have not really operationalized deeper into your organization. So this is a typical example. Because it's been always people ask me from organizations like, hey, I'm just a HR manager. How can how can I support the vision of the company when it goes to be more sustainable or and so on? So which means this is the overall strategy or the core vision is not integrated into all your departments and everything, right? So this is where like we stop for the separation part of it. Now the loop is the most interesting part, is where you actually integrate that into your system, right? So the loop is very simple. So in the loop, you need to first identify what do you care, right? Decide what it matters for you, you as in your company, right? So that's where you need to start, right? Second one, you need to find ways, where do I get the signals of what do I care? So that's the second part of it. So which is the most important thing to understand, figure out here, because if you cannot measure, you cannot change or you cannot claim. So you have to measure at some point of time. And if you cannot measure, that means your care is wrong. So you have to go back to your care to actually fix your care, right? So after you know where to measure, right? So you learn from it, meaning like what are all the drivers of these things? So that's where your learning thing has to happen. So once you learn, you optimize or adapt the changes into your operations to optimize this. Like, so those drivers will show up in different part of your systems and processes. You identify those processes, prioritize, and you adapt, and you start looking for a change there. And then eventually you go into a term called narratives, or report it to a external or internal organization to see how it goes. And after that, it actually goes back to the care. So when you see the report, you need to understand whether your care is correct or not. Maybe your care is wrong. So if your care is wrong, then the entire process itself is wrong. So it actually goes into an endless looping here. So that's since it is a continuous change efforts, right? It goes into here. What usually people make mistakes here is from care, it actually goes back to the report. Like in your previous this course we mentioned, right? It looks for funding, right? So when you're looking for funding, you go and see the whoever is the investor of yours, what you're looking for. You went directly into the report so that you convince them like we are a sustainability company. So that's you see there's an operational issue in the middle, right? So from care, we just jump straight into the report. So usually what happens is the care is primarily connected to your investors. So if your investors is interested in only in green, right? So they're not really interested in creating an impact in the society or community and so on, then eventually your care become straight away what is the care of your investors. So then you don't even know whether you can able to monitor or whether you can able to find a driver, whether you have a driver towards that, or whether how we can optimize and other things, but you just jump back into the report. So that's how usually it fails or stalls, because you cannot jump to report part of it or the narrative part of it without integrating into your actual business processes and so on. There may be a situation that whatever is needed from your investor perspective, right? So it may not be you cannot be able to achieve it because the nature of your operations itself, right? So that's how this is a loop which is pretty high level. It works differently for different companies. This is more like a context, not the content. So ignore the content, but take the context here. So the context is it has to go into a loop, whether it is a 5-step or 6-step loop, doesn't matter, but it has to go through a loop and it has to have these components inside your loop. You can create your own loops as you go forward. But most important factor is you need to really identify what do you exactly care, right? And then after what you exactly care, you need to see that do I have signals coming out of my business processes. So if your business is not related to your care, then your care is wrong. You actually go back to the step, right? Okay. So yeah. So and then again, I want to give you another small example in here. People always start with E, which is basically a fancy term because I'm going green, I'm going solar, blah blah blah, all these things. But whether it creates the actual impact, we don't know. It goes back to the loop again. So you need to find out what do you care, what signal you get it. That's the second step. If you're a tech company or a cybersecurity company, for example, right? So you produce software for cybersecurity for your clients, right? So here you may not be having any clean impact on an E, but you will have a very strong impact on the G, right? So which is the most easiest thing because your own system carries the information, data, and everything in here. The loop kind of completes very fast here, right? Compared to you trying to create an impact. Remember the example I give you? I changed all plastic cups to recycled paper. Does it really going to create the impact compared to this? It's a question you need to ask, depends on your business and depends on the systems and processes you have, right? So then goes to the social aspect of it. The social is your own people. You always have a direct partners, right, which is your colleagues and your teams. And then the signal may be very slow. How what is the level of impact I'm creating in terms of my community and so on. The signal may be slow, but you own the signal. It's easy for you to measure the impact and find out. And then E is the last part of it, which is very hard, especially even for your own scope. Even in the scope 1, E is kind of very hard to actually calculate the exact impact compared to S and G. And if you go towards scope 2 and 3, then it's more complicated. It's very difficult and it's a very complex mathematics to work on to find the actual impact. And even if you calculate the actual impact, there is always a question of how accurate is your calculation will always be challenged in the process, right? So keeping this in mind, go back to the previous slide, which is basically the loop. Remember, you need to find out what you care, and you need to identify in your systems what kind of signals I can pick up in from my systems and from my processes that I can monitor to support my care. So once you do that, what you do is you learn from it, which means you try to measure, monitor, and so on, and then you adapt, right? So after you adapt, you narrate your impact, right? And then you go back to the care again to see whether my care is correct, or can I add on more to my care because my system have more information than what I have. So the cybersecurity company I was telling you just in the before, right? So if you're having a software which actually helps banks to monitor the attacks and how much it prevents and how much it actually resolves, rectifies, and other things, that telemetry data is basically an ESG scoring data. So you can offer that as an impact back to your clients, and also you can put it in your own ESG reporting, or the sustainability impact reporting, whatever you call it in your company. That particular data back into the system. It is an auditable data. It is a data which you can actually prove, and it's a data where it actually shows you the actual impact in the community and also to your clients or the market, whatever you are in place. Right. So, and then it's always about that loop. Remember the product, if you have a product, there is always a monitoring system inside your product, which actually learns working and adapts in real times. That's the loop we are already running it, but just that we have not named it with the sustainability label because we are a bit more consumed towards, what is the care? The care is either I'm going to follow what my investor is doing, or I'm going to follow what my clients are doing, and so on. Like for example, a bank may be your client, but the bank is very much driven very heavily on the environmental impact, the powers, the amount of money they spend on the investors, on green bonds and so on, right? But you, as a software company providing them a cybersecurity solution, you cannot give a green impact for them. But what you can do is you can actually do a G impact for them, right? So that's why the care part is more important in the looping system. So, and then the security ops is what we talked just now. Actually, what the security ops data you have is not a policy document. It's more like your real data and auditable, provable data, right? So what do you claim versus what do you prove is the most important thing when you're looking for the narratives. That's where the care, monitor, learn, and adapt is more important because you have to monitor what you claim, right? So then you can able to prove. Yeah. So for the software companies, the muscle always exists, but just that you didn't name it in a particular way that can be seen as a sustainability impact to your clients or to the market or to your partners, whoever you wanted to put it to, right? Okay, so this is my final poll before we go into the loop of care. Okay, so keeping this in mind, the loop in mind, right? The care, monitor, what is care is what am I going to do? What do I care for in terms of ESG? And then monitor what kind of signals I can pick up from my systems and processes. And third is like, which will help me to calculate and find the impact. And then am I going to adapt and adjust so that actually I can improve my care score over a period of time? And then I do the narrative. So based on that, if I ask you these questions, right? So where does your thing sits? Yeah. If you already have a document, if it sits there, we don't know how to implement, then it goes to the first question. Second one is if you're reporting already, but I'm not sure, then it goes there. In your daily systems is very good. Not sure. Yes. They give you like 10 seconds. Okay. All right, it's good. Two of participants said it is inside your system, which is a very good thing. You just need to give a sustainability flavor to that and then make sure that the care you identified in the beginning aligns to that because you already have the data, you're already inside your system. So you just need to make sure that the care is optimized and then you can run through the loop again and again so we can run through. Okay. So It is very simple. I would just want to wrap up the second session, which is basically care. Identify what you care. Monitor is from your systems and processes. You should able to pick up this. This is what I say, right? If it doesn't exist in your system, if it is not shown up in your system, it doesn't exist. So which means it has to be inside your monitor, right? A box, right? Then you learn from the system and then you adapt and then you report and then you go back to the care. The cycle is something we know. We have done this many times for many different change programs. I'm sure everybody of you have done it. Maybe you give it a different name, but it's just a loop. Like, so remember this loop. If you see your sustainability efforts with this loop, you probably will see it a bit differently. Yeah. So here I'm going to show you some examples of, somebody has to pay for it, right? Remember the classic example we had for the cold storage company. So where they were almost went to bankrupt. Then we went to support them, and then how we supported them, I'll show you, right? So there's actually not a money tree, right? So there's always an impact on your P&L when you start spending some money on something which does not give you a direct revenue impact or a margin impact, right? So when we do a digital transformation project, why we do it? We save cost, we increase operational efficiency, and so on, right? So it actually pays back in a shorter time, maybe like 3 months or 6 months or 9 months. But there is some impact which is coming. We know how much expected impact is. Like, for example, by moving towards this AI tool in my company, I'm going to save my cost or improve my efficiency with my clients or something by this many percentage, right? So the claim may be 50%, but you can calculate it like, oh, I have an impact of 20%. Then you start working on why that 30% is not achieved. Remember the loop I was talking about? It's the same way. It is easy for projects like digital transformation and I think because we know the time frame where we can see the impact. But when it comes to sustainability, the impact usually comes after like 30, 40 years, right? Which is very difficult for us to even quantify whether we are doing the right thing or not, right? So when you think like this and when you're looking for a target at 2050 or 2030, then it is a long term for you to even think about it. And during this time, something may happen in the market or something may happen with your investors or something may happen within the company itself that will actually put the company into a different question than focus on the sustainability itself, right? So somebody has to pay any green investment or any kind of investment for this sake needs to come from your P&L or your suppliers or clients and or shareholders or your own people. For example, the cold storage example, I said it came from the clients and also it came from the supplier itself, right? So we have a problem there, and then it indirectly impacted your P&L, and then the P&L indirectly impacted your people. Yeah. So E is expensive and slow to pay back. Usually, it will take quite a bit of time. First of all, remember the loop cycle. Yes, I care for E, but in the monitoring system, I cannot able to pick up effectively, like so that I can quantify what is the actual impact I'm delivering in name of the E, right? So that's where the biggest gap is. Yeah. But the cost will happen immediately today. So eventually, I put it back again, saying that whenever you touch the P&L, what we do is we actually go into the quietest group of the area where we can take the money from, which is usually the people in any organization. Cut the bonus or reduce the bonus or reduce the increment or whatsoever we do. Okay, so that's the trade. Okay, this is a bit of a repetition. Let me go to an example so it's more easier to see, right? So I want to leave this slide with one word, which saying like, when you move sustainability pain from one place to another place, that is actually not sustainability. In fact, you're working against sustainability. When your E starts to eat the S, then it's actually you're working against the principle of sustainability itself. So you're actually doing negative impact than doing in the name of doing positive, right? So that's the trade, right? So the money always comes from a small, the softer place, so there's always an impact to somebody in the chain when you invest something because the revenue is not going to be increased. Like for example, unless you quantify them in an effective way, unless you operationalize this in an effective way. So I want to go back to that cold storage example, and I wanted to put them into a cycle. So what happens is initially there was no loop, right? So there's no loop of like, what do I care? What is the monitor I need to do, where I can learn, and also where I can adapt and where I can actually report. So this is not interconnected. So they went straight from care. Yes, the care is basically my one of my primary suppliers, like vendors pushing me towards go into sustainability because I'm part of their scope 2 and 3 to partially some 3. So then eventually what I do is that I wanted to look for something so that it actually convinced them as a tick point, right? Are you a sustainability company? Do you have a plan and everything? Tick, tick, tick. Then I'm safe here, right? So, but that requires an impact, and every year it goes back into reporting and so on. So what do we do is very simple. So we actually went back to the same vendor who is actually pushing them, supplier who is pushing them to go these guys into supply chain, into sustainability. We asked them for an extra credit, and then we went into a banking system to ask for subsidies and also guarantees for them to hold certain fixed deposits and so on. And then that actually helps them to bridge the gap, and also it gives them the initial investment without taking from the P&L because it went in the form of government initiatives and so on. And then eventually that savings from the energy, they get it from the solar and everything is kind of started funding them. Right. So this is what we call it as what we call as in operationalizing sustainability. So this is here, what we did is we actually went deeper into the systems and processes to see where is the impact affecting, which are the signals it is coming from. So the signals showed us this path, and then we started implementing this path. The person who is actually forcing the actual vendor who is forcing them to go into sustainability route allowed this 30 days extra credit, which actually went into a bank fixed deposit for them. And then the bank is willing to give a higher interest rate because for the fixed deposit, because it is meant to use for green efforts and green initiatives and so on. So it's kind of a win-win situation for almost everybody. So here what happened is he is basically funding itself. It is not taking from any of the P&L and everything. But in the long run, eventually what will happen is the company will become more profitable because of this energy saving coming from the so-called green energy transition they are doing. I know this is not related to tech, but this is something I wanted to show you so that you have, out of the box example of how people can operationalize this one. So the concept is the same. I'm going more greener, right? I have to run 24/7 electricity because I'm a cold storage facilities. I store a lot of things which is completely cold, and it is very temperature controlled. And I have a huge warehouse of storing, all the goods which is coming in, right? So I cannot switch off my aircon in any ways. It has to be always running 24/7 running. But you see the whole thing, it went in a different way. Okay, so this is another example for the SaaS companies. So in the interest of time, I will just rush it a little faster. So it's the same thing where the concept is the same, right? So you have to identify the things which you can monitor from your systems and processes, and you adapt and you learn from it, and then go to the narrative. Don't jump to narrative straight from care. So it's like, oh, I wanted to report green. What all I can do? Okay, change my cup from plastic to paper, recycled paper. Will that really create an impact? In paper it looks nice, but will that really create an impact? That's the question, right? So this is for a SaaS company, and for an infrastructure company, it's a similar way. You need to go deeper into your systems and processes to understand this. For the infrastructure company, especially the data center companies, there is a lot of things you have to take into account. The variable is very high because you impact not only the water and the energy need for the infrastructures, but also the associated communities. Because when you take certain things out of the community's natural balance, then eventually there is a problem you're creating in the community, which is the indirect or too direct effort, depends on where the infrastructure sits actually, right? So, and then this is for the PE companies where you need to look into a deeper way. But in PE companies, we call it as like asset and fund. You need to see this in two different ways. There are some frameworks and there are some methodologies available how a PE companies can work on these things. Right. But again, depends on how you do. Your portfolio companies has to operationalize or go into a loop. So when they go into a loop, it's easy for the P companies or the investors to pick up signals from them directly from their systems, and which becomes more credible the amount of reporting and data impact we are doing. And again, I wanted to reemphasize this. You need to be very clear when you define what do you care, right? Because the what you care has to associate towards your business processes and business operations. If you care for something which does not create any enough impact from your actual operations itself, right? Then your care itself is wrong, which means your target itself is wrong. So, for example, if I'm running a mall and I'm trying to work on a like a big CRM system, right, which does multi-country operations more smoother. But I'm running a mall, but it is only in one country, and I don't have any plans to go to another country. That means that CRM system itself is a wrong thing for you, because your care itself is a wrong assumption. So that's where you need to look for it. And usually the answer for the care is sitting inside your systems and processes, because that is where it can show you where you can actually deliver the right level of impact, right? So oh, sorry, I think I have one more before. Okay, this is my last poll. So out of G, governance, S, social, and E, environment, where do you think you struggle the most in your company today? Yeah. Let's give like another 20 seconds to do a quick poll on this one so that it actually helps. And then we have one more session to finish, which is related to the investors. So you see, in the results says governance and social rights. Eventually, what happens is you are not identified the so-called the second step, right? The first step, you probably have identified what you really care for in your business, but the second step, you have not correlated that what you care for with actually what you can get out of your process or your business itself. So that's where you have the difficulties in there. And social part, it's complex, depends on how do you define. So you have to go back to the so-called care. And then in the care, you have to explain what do I really care? And you need to make sure there is a system in place or the process in place for you to identify this. So I'm going to give few more seconds. All right, let's go to the next slide. So again, the question is, the summary here is someone always pay, always remember this one, right? So, and the final part is the where the money moved, right? So you must have heard this very famous video. If you Google today, you can find it from Financial Times. Who killed the ESG party? Right, so or sustainability, but I exactly forgot the word. This is by Financial Times, and it was a very famous video in the community, like which basically tells like who actually killed the ESG party. So if you didn't listen before, I probably go and find this one. It's more easier. And also there is a lot of news, in the last 24 months that, a lot of banks are pulling out of a lot of things. So, but if you read the fine prints, right? So why people have really stopped certain things is because they cannot able to qualify the actual impact, right? But whatever they are stopping, like for example, if I say I have a green bond, right? So the green bond has to have an impact, right? So we can say like, okay, I'm funding this particular project under the green bond scheme, but where do I measure my impact, right? Because you see, remember the impact takes quite a long time to even come or even measure and so on. So there's a lot of things happening on that left side of it. But if you see on the right side again, so there's a substantial amount of changes happening and the investments and money are going. So basically, the money have moved from a wrapper to the like actual operationalized ESG. So the money is actually moving towards the places where there is an actual impact, can be measurable, quantifiable. And it is not like people are pulling out of alliance and other things. There are many reasons on politics behind that one, but in the community, right, it actually tripled in the last 24 months, the amount of investment towards create clean tech or towards something clean, clean energy and so on have increased quite substantially. And also there is a governance angle also put in place. Like for example, CSRD made the supply chain due diligence mandatory now. And also it's going through including all the non-EU companies as well. For example, if I'm a palm oil vendor, related, I'm using some palm oil products, then eventually, you have to go to your source, which is say Malaysia or somewhere where you are actually importing all your raw materials or processed products and everything, you have to get them into the CSRD compliance as well. So, which is what is happening in the other side of the world. So, there is a pullback in which you always read in the news, but there is always a heavy amount of acceleration happening in different parts of the world. Okay, and then I wanted to run through this one, the sustainability, right, from the so-called say-do gap, in this exposed in the capital industries, especially in the recent 24 to 36 months. So when the loop is broken, so people are stopped funding those things and they move the fund towards something where the impact is actually measurable. Right. We can actually skip that lesson in terms of like how the actual, I mean, if you're an investor, you can skip that lesson of like, how do you do it? Instead, you can just go to the next step straight away, like, identify where the impact is and you start funding the impact level, right? So, and then this is some more data for you, right? So, but, the key part is the last point, if people who are looking for funding, right? So DFL capital funding, so they is make it very straightforward that they will fund heavily on the operationalized ESG companies, not on the companies which claims impact and so on. So when I say claims impact, right, changing my coffee cup from plastic to a paper cup, is actually a good way of doing it, but where exactly is the impact calculation is what people are questioning these days, especially from the funding group of it, right? So, again, when you're looking at funding your supply chain, you have to also make sure that, it follows the same process. And for tech companies, right, especially if you're using AI and cloud footprints, you need to make sure that, you need to identify this risk in your suppliers or vendors who are actually offering you these facilities and functions. Because if it not, it becomes a supply chain resilience problem over a period of time. And that's why if you say the big three companies like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, they have a very strict rule in terms of data center operators and so on. Yeah. So this is where it is. And again, I wanted to go into this one. The capital basically stopped funding the label, but they started funding the loop. Actually, the loop is again going back to the same thing: care, monitor, learn, adapt, and also report. Right. So this is where it is. So in a nutshell, this is my last slide. In a nutshell, I wanted to say, in operations, we always look for operational excellence, but we always forget operational innovation. So operational innovation is what will help companies to go more sustainable. But operational excellence is also needed for companies to run today. But again, sustainability is always about tomorrow. So drive towards operational innovation. If you combine both of them together, so then it will help you achieve or operationalize your sustainability goals very effectively in your company, right? Excellence is the engine. We need the engine, and then eventually the innovation is basically the multiplier. Innovation is, for example, the one I showed you for the cold storage example. That's actually where the operational innovation kicked in. So it basically adjusted certain numbers and adapted certain things so that it works on this way. All right. So the question I wanted to ask today, right? When you all go back, don't need to answer now, but it's just like if you remove your sustainability report or the narrative you have, will anything change in your operations on daily operations? If it doesn't change, that means you have not integrated well enough into your processes, so that you started to look into the loop and then try to correct and adjust the loop so that it will eventually help you integrate it effectively. So that is my last slide.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, so it's another Salamander presentation today. There's an amazing team of people like Yogesh as part of the Salamander team. So yeah, feel free to reach out to Yogesh or Bill, and we'll be in touch with you and give you the information. We're going to have a video from this. Yogesh, you're going to share the deck as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Right. Okay. So I'll share the deck with you all as well, and go from there. But thank you very much. It was really fantastic. So look forward to the next session. Excellent.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for your time. I hope it is useful. Do reach out to us if you have any questions or anything. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Really good answer. Very enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Look forward to the next session. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent.